our audit practice area leader. She kind of heads up the group, but Janice is still on our committee. And Joe's on our committee too. So that's why we get you here today. We're so excited that you'd be willing to give your time.
Joe's getting low-hanging fruit, huh? Getting
Not at all. Not at all. He raved about you. He had lots of good things to say and thought you'd be a good asset to our meeting. So,
oh, thanks, Joe, for putting in a good word.
You can pay me later.
Babysitting or some other familial favor.
I only accept cash.
Right. Hi, Janice. We were just talking about how our paths have crossed digitally, but we've never actually, I think, met.
Right. Yeah. When Joe brought you up as a speaker, he's like, I think you know my sister Lynn. And I was like, I do on social media.
It's on social media. It's a pleasure to meet you. I was telling Sheila and Sierra that I have long been an admirer of yours. So
thank you. Both ways.
It's nice to properly connect.
Well, it looks like it is noon. We could probably go ahead and get started. Welcome to our WIP meeting today. We are so excited. We've got such a great meeting. Just by way of reminder, we love it if you share your cameras. It's so much better to talk to faces rather than blank screens. So if you feel comfortable, please share your camera and also make sure you're on mute. Just so that we don't get that echoey weird sound or dogs barking in the background like you might hear mine, hopefully not. But we are very grateful to have Lynn Johnson with us today. She's going to be our guest speaker. We're going to do I'm going to do a little introduction first of our theme for the year, and then we're going to let Joe introduce his sister. But we're very grateful for her being here for today and taking her time, her valuable time to present to us. I was looking up on a little bit about your company, Lynn, and checked out your website and your app, and it seems really exciting. So I'm really anxious to hear more about it and your path, and it'll be good. So I'm excited. Okay, so every year, the WIP Leadership Committee comes up with a theme for the year. And the theme we came up with this year is based on some of the meetings that we went to when we went to the AICPA Women's Conference that was back in November. When I say went to, we joined virtually. So the theme for the year is going to be empowering women with confidence, presence, and voice. And I am super excited about that theme because I think it's something that we can all benefit from. We can all be more empowered as women, women working professionally, to step up and to, own our own careers and our own path and our own future. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I wanted to let you know that I have felt empowered since I was in junior high. And it's because of my name, because my name is Sheila and my middle name is Ray, Sheila Ray. And my dad had a nickname for me. He called me She-Ray. And then this awesome cartoon came out. And I wanted to share a little clip about this cartoon, and maybe you'll understand why it made me feel empowered. So I am hopefully going to share this the right way. Oh, I don't think that worked right because I didn't get the sound. Let me try it again. There we go. Okay.
He-Man's twin sister and defender of the Crystal Castle. This is Spirit, my beloved steed. Fabulous secrets were revealed to me the day I held aloft my sword and said, "For the honor of Grayskull!"
Okay. So my friends started calling me She-Ra after they heard my dad call me She-Ray. And obviously I felt super empowered because I was the princess of power, right? But I was thinking that like all of us could feel empowered, like Riva, princess of power, or Shara. Even if your name was Lori, you could be Laura, princess of power. So fill in your name. You are also a princess of power, and we can and we can feel empowered. I looked up the definition of empowered and what it meant because I wanted to understand a little bit more. And I loved the definition that I found. I just Googled it. And the definition I found said, to make someone stronger and more confident, especially in controlling their life and claiming their rights. So as a WIP group and a WIP committee, we talked about empowering women and what we can do as a group to help all of us feel more empowered. And so what we've decided to do a couple of things this year. One is our meeting topics for the year will be all things that are empowering topics. I want to run through the list of what we're going to talk about this year, what our meetings are going to be. But before I do that, the other thing that we wanted to do was we felt like it was really important to include the members of our WIP group more in planning our meetings and help determining the topics. So you remember that Sierra sent out a survey about a month ago or so and asked you all for your feedback on what the topics for our meetings should be this year. And we loved the input that we got and why you picked the topics that you did. And so we tallied the results, and that's where we came up with our meeting topics for this year. The other thing we want to do is we want to include you all in our planning. And so as I read through the topics and what we're going to cover this year, if there's a topic that sticks out to you, and I'm going to post them in our Teams group later, but if there's a topic that speaks to you that you would love to be a part in the planning of that meeting, please message me or Jenny Green and let us know what meeting you'd like to help plan. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the one speaking at the meeting, although it could be if you so felt, but just to help us plan and come up with ideas on what you want that meeting to be, what you think would be a great activity to do or a great speaker to bring in or whatever it might be. Okay, so obviously today we're talking about our theme, our Empowering Women theme. And Lynn is going to speak to that. She's also going to talk about some other things as well that Jill will tell us, and she'll tell us in a minute. Our meeting for March is going to be on assertiveness and how we can be more assertive. In April, we're going to be talking about communication and how we can improve our communication skills with coworkers, with clients, with whoever. In May, we're going to talk about and learn about presentation skills, how we can present ourselves better when we're talking to clients or when you have to get up in front of a group and do a training. So presentation skills, which I think is huge for helping to progress in your career, is how to present yourself and come off professionally and competent and yes. And then in July, we'll do our golf tournament, our annual golf tournament, which is always a lot of fun. It gives us an opportunity to meet with people at Squire that you don't normally work with and get to know them a little bit better, and also just to have fun. In August, we're going to be talking about body image and self-care. In September, it's going to be a community event. We're kind of in the very early stages of planning that. I think self-confidence will be our topic there. But we're also hoping to involve other people outside of Squire in that. In October, we're going to talk about negotiation and refusal skills, a very important thing, especially if you're like me and you've accepted more work than you can handle, right? Or you accept a lot of tasks and then you don't have time to do it, or you're not sure how to do it. So negotiation and refusal skills. And then in November, we're just going to do something fun. Just to connect together as women and have fun together. In December, we'd like to do a charitable event, something that furthers the purpose of our WIP group, something to help women empower other women outside of Squire. So that is our lineup for this year of our meeting topics. I'm super excited, like I said, about all of those topics. They all speak to me. And if any of them speak to you, then please let me know. Again, I said I'll post those in Teams later today, so you can look over those meeting topics. We also might, even if you don't volunteer, we might ask you for help. If you would be willing, that would be great, depending on how many people we get to say that they'd like to help plan a meeting. So keep that in mind. All right, so I think that that's all I needed to talk about today. I am going to turn the time over to Joe to introduce Lynn, and then Lynn will have the rest of our meeting. So go ahead, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. I'm very proud to introduce my sister, Lynn Johnson. Super excited for her to be here. Lynn is 4 years younger than I am. She and I are both from Orem, Utah. We both graduated from BYU at the exact same time back in 2004 with a MAC in tax. Lynn went to the big city in New York and joined PwC, joined their capital markets group in tax, and worked on some big clients like Goldman and other big financial service providers. In 2008, Lynn and her family moved to Southern California, where she took a job as CFO for Locus Financial, and also similar in the private equity space. After a time, Lynn's dream was to go back to school, and she applied to some prestigious schools like the London School of Economics and Oxford, and ultimately decided to get her MBA at Oxford, which she did in 2017 and 2018. And I think the cool thing about Oxford is not only developing business leaders, but it's got an emphasis on building businesses that are out doing good. And so after graduating from Oxford, Lynn started a business, West 10th, which helps female-led home-based businesses. And I'll let Lynn talk about it more. But super excited to have Lynn speak to us today. And Lynn Marie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Thanks, Sheila. I love that clip of Shira, by the way. Reminded me of those high cheekbones in the 80s. Love Shira. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen and just go through some slides. And Joe kind of instructed me on, he's kind of covered, honestly, my career path. So I'll touch on it a little bit because I think it's important to hear other people's journeys. But then I'm going to dive into the motivations for veering from kind of the traditional path that I was on and that was very comfortable, and then the motivations for starting a business that helps women, because all the motivations that made me want to start a business actually touch all of our lives as women. So if that's okay, I'll just dive right in. Hold on. Can you all see my screen? Yeah, you're okay?
Yes, we can see it. I can.
Perfect. So this is my co-founder and I, Sarah. We actually went to BYU together with Joe, and I think Kim Gardner, if she's on, we went to school with Kim too.
Yes, and I remember Sarah. I didn't realize that you did the company together.
Yeah. So interestingly, we decided to go and get jobs in New York because we didn't think that we could get jobs in Utah, because only the smartest and best people in our class, like Kim, could actually get the jobs that were in Utah. So if you're working at Squire or you're working in Utah at all as an accountant or CPA, you're the smartest of the bunch. We went to New York. We started at PwC together in their banking and capital markets division, had some great experiences. Then I moved to California because my husband was wanting to get his MBA. at UCLA. So I followed him and went to the private sector and became a CFO at a private financial advisory firm that services ultra high net worth clients primarily. I didn't start out as a CFO, but I eventually became the CFO. But I'd seen my husband get an MBA. I'd seen how that had kind of changed him and given him some critical thinking skills. And I, quite frankly, wanted that for myself. But I didn't really have that in the master plan. I had kids, and that having kids and a job was enough at the time. But there was something inside of me that agitated for more education. And so as my kids got a little bit older, I decided to look for opportunities for education. And by happenstance, the first vacation my husband and I had been on in 12 years together, we went to London, and there happened to be a graduate school fair there at the same time that we were there. So I popped into it, and no one was in line at the Oxford Business School table. So I just went to talk to them about the possibility of applying and going to school at Oxford. And to my absolute surprise, they looked at my qualifications and they said that I would be eligible and that they encouraged me to apply. So I did. And again, to my surprise, I got into business school there. Now, at the time, I got into business school and I thought, well, that's kind of a waste, honestly, because we can't go there. My husband has a job. We need someone to have a job while I go to school. It's really an impossibility, and I probably shouldn't have ever applied. And when I brought that thought up to my husband, my sweet husband said, you know what, it's our lives. And if this is something that's important to you and you want to do it, then I will tell my job that either they're going to let me work mobily for the 13 months that the program entails, or I will find another job in London for you to do this. And so we packed up our bags, we packed up our kids, and we moved overseas so that I could go to graduate school. And part of graduate school was exploring some topics that I had always deeply cared about as a finance professional. And part of it was exploring new career options, because even though I had a really great job and it was really stable, and I was able to be a good mother to my children at the same time as working at this job, I just felt like there was some other work that I needed to be doing. And so going back to school was an opportunity to explore that as well. So while I was at school, I took the opportunity to study this issue that had always bothered me as a finance professional. And this is what I kind of want to get into and the meat of this presentation, and that was the gender wealth gap in the United States. So being in accounting and finance, I had become acutely aware of the gendered wealth gap, which is, everyone's heard of the wage gap, and there are arguments for and against the legitimacy of the wage gap, but less is known about the wealth gap. And the wealth gap is actually the bigger problem. The wage gap actually just contributes to the wealth gap. But it's where women in the US only own about 32 cents in financial assets to every dollar in financial assets that men own. And what I mean by that is all their financial savings or reserves of wealth. They own about 32 cents to every dollar that men own. So that's 401ks, it's savings accounts, it's access to Social Security benefits, it's employee benefits, health benefits, it's things like that. Women own a third of what men own. And if you're a woman of color, that number is not just tragic, it's abysmal. It's 2 cents to every dollar in financial assets that men own. What that translates into is that the average woman owns about $3,000 in financial reserves. Average woman from age 20 to age 75 owns about $3,000 in financial reserves. This is something I wanted to study when I went back to school. And so I did take a lot of time studying women's economic opportunity in the United States to get to kind of the bottom of the reasons for the wealth gap. Some of the reasons are well known. The biggest reason is because women exit the workforce. This is also one of the causes of the wage gap. Women exit the workforce when they have children because of caregiving responsibilities. But that choice ends up in lower earnings over time, lower paid jobs generally, because women tend to enter industries that are more friendly to their caregiving responsibilities. Those also tend to be low pay industries. They also have less access to capital, including mortgage debt and credit card debt. I don't know if you heard the story recently of Steve Wozniak, who said Apple issued their own credit cards, Apple Pay credit cards through Capital One. And Steve Wozniak, the former founder of Apple, co-founder of Apple, he and his wife applied for the credit card. And his wife actually was given less available credit than he was by a very wide margin. And he actively complained about it and said, she's got a better credit score than I do, and she has access to the exact same net wealth that I do. So why has she been given less credit? And it's just a kind of an example of something that's systematic. Women have less access to financial reserves across the board, less access to even credit card capital, and also mortgage debt. And mortgages and owning homes is a way to build wealth. So if you have less access to those financial assets, you have less access to wealth generation. And then because they leave the workforce, again, they have less access to 401k, retirement savings, health benefits, Social Security, all these things that are tied to employment. Now, we are super good as a society at helping women out of the workforce, and we're not very good at helping women back into the workforce. So, and then what I mean by that is, as a society, we really support the choice to leave, and we support it through systems, not just cultural expectations, but through our systems. So our tax systems that actually create a tax penalty for dual earner households, and a tax bonus for single earner households. Our school systems that are set up to have children leave school in the middle of the day. The fact that women tend to enter lower pay industries to begin with in anticipation of caring for children. They end up making lower wages in comparison to their partner. So when it becomes a choice as to who will take care of children, it feels like a more natural choice that the one with less economic potential might be the one to exit the workforce. Lack of paid leave, maternity leave, and like I mentioned, tax penalties. All these things serve to help women out of the workforce. And interestingly, the two groups that you see most likely to exit the workforce are those in the highest household income quintile and those in the lowest household income quintile. They're both actually have the same pressures exerted on them, but they are manifest in different ways. But these two groups are the most likely to leave. Although there are women in all sorts of economic positions that leave the workforce, but these two are just the most likely. Now, interestingly, and what I'll say is, this is not necessarily a bad thing that women leave the workforce. It's really good for our societies. You know, they tend to be really active in our school systems as an additional unpaid workforce in the school systems. They work in our churches, they work in our nonprofit organizations. They really uphold, quite frankly, our societies while they're away. But the cost is to the individual. So we are leaving women economically vulnerable. We're expecting them to kind of uphold and take on a lot of unpaid work, but at their own detriment, at the detriment of keeping them economically vulnerable. Does that make sense? And then we often entrench that. So because it becomes, once women leave, because it becomes so hard to re-enter, it becomes kind of a dichotomous choice, right? Are you working mom or are you a stay-at-home mom? Well, that's just a social construct, to be honest with you. All moms are working moms. Some are working outside the home, some are working in the home. But if you look at time use studies, women are actually working 2 hours more than men during the week. So they're all working, but we've also tied that decision of leaving the workforce or remaining in the workforce to women's identities. And by tying it to their identities, that choice is such a big choice that we need to almost internalize that choice into our identity. Does that make sense? And once we've done that, we're entrenching that choice even further, and we're making it harder and harder for you to reverse that choice and making the choice fluid. And And then once you've made that choice, we're kind of approving certain work. We're approving more unpaid work for women. We think of it as kind of sanctioned work if women are working in their schools, in their churches, in their nonprofit organizations. That's kind of sanctioned work. But another type of sanctioned work is women running a business from home. We feel like that's approved because it gives them flexibility to still be, quote unquote, good moms. That results in 28 million women in 2019, working age women that didn't participate in the workforce. These are 28 million women that basically become quite economically vulnerable over the course of their lives. Like I said, they leave to care for their families, they uphold our communities, but the longer they're gone, the more their employment options evaporate, and the less and less we support them in returning to meaningful work, to the detriment of women's economic futures. Now, in 2020, I don't know if you guys have seen the headlines, but 2020 was just a devastating year for women and their economic futures. More women than men were affected by layoffs, and then we had an unprecedented opt-out of the workforce for women as they grappled with new online schooling responsibilities and keeping their families healthy and safe. So basically, women's careers and their financial futures have been stalled by about 10 years just in the last 12 months. So there are ways, though, that wealth generation happens. We talked about home ownership as being one of the ways that wealth generation happens. Another is micro-entrepreneurship. So women starting businesses from home, which is kind of an approved, sanctioned way for women who have decided to exit the workforce to still generate income and wealth. In fact, the Women's Initiative Research and Public Policy Division said that micro-entrepreneurship gives women the chance to leverage her skills, creativity, and hard work through business ownership, and allows a woman to create her own upward mobility. So what we're seeing is that once women have left the workforce, they kind of know that their employment options are limited. Sorry, I'm going to run to another slide. They kind of know that their employment options are limited. And as an alternative to employment, more and more women are starting businesses from home. They're turning to this micro-entrepreneurship. You see it in the rise of Etsy, where women are creating handcrafted goods businesses. But more than that, many, many women are turning the expertise that they've developed in the home into businesses that they run from home. And what I mean by that is they recognize employment options may be limited, or they may not afford them the flexibility that they still need inside the home once they've made that decision to leave. But they also recognize that they have become experts in some area of household and family management. They have put in the 10,000 Malcolm Gladwell hours, if you will, to become an expert in baking, in home organization, in family vacation planning, these types of things. And they're starting businesses in their home that serve their local communities based on those talents. In fact, there are 9 million women-led home-based businesses in the United States today. 1/3 of them are owned by women of color, and the market size for those women is about $9 billion currently. Their motivations. Generally, they're motivated to generate vital additional household income. So you're seeing women who were affected by layoffs in 2020. They're turning to micro-entrepreneurship to add household income to their homes, to be able to pay for the lessons that they had their children in, to be able to pay for school lunches even. We mentioned that $3,000 is the average store of wealth for each woman. So if a woman can generate even an additional $1,000 to $5,000 into her household, that is meaningful for her, really meaningful. For some women, it's to explore ambition and their potential. They've kind of left the workforce and they've dedicated themselves to family and community. And to them, starting a business is an expression of their ambition and a refocus on their own talents. It's also, they're motivated to start businesses from home to create their own flexibility because employment can often hamper that. And many of them just have really big ambitions. They want to start something that they think can grow. For instance, we have a woman on our platform and she's a dog sitter. She loves dogs, but her ultimate ambition is to create a Disneyland for dogs and pets. Or we have women who are creating baking out of their home, and their ambition is to open up a bake shop eventually, a brick and mortar. So they have desires to create sizable and wealth generating businesses from the skills they've developed in the home. So that leads me to West 10th. West 10th is the company that Sarah and I created after business school. And it's a marketplace where you can find the women in your own community who have started and are running businesses from home. We're aggregating them, we're giving them visibility, allowing local consumers to access them. And then on the back end, we're giving them educational support and business management tools. For instance, West 10th is connecting the budding photographer to the bride-to-be down the street who's on a budget. We're connecting the woman with a beautifully curated Instagram account to the dentist's office in her town that needs a social media manager. And we're connecting the woman who can organize like a boss to her harried neighbors. I think that is actually the whole presentation. I wanted to talk to you about basically the wealth gap and what our motivations for starting this business was to help women regain financial stability after a prolonged absence from employment. But I also just kind of want to talk about some of these constructs around working women versus non-working women or stay-at-home women, because they affect us too. When you're in the workforce, these constructs and these pressures actually fall to us as well. So one of the motivations that I have that I don't mention in the slide deck is for starting this is I felt like personally, as I remained in the workforce, the standards for me keeping the way that I would manage my home and family remained just impossibly high. I knew I was really good at bringing home a paycheck. I knew I was really good at loving my kids and being a good mom to my kids, but I wasn't good at creating those special birthday parties. I wasn't good at decorating my home. And for some reason, that pressure still existed on me to do those things. And I wanted a way to be able to reach out to the women around me whom I knew were experts in these things and put money in their pockets and alleviate that burden on myself too. Because I felt the pressure on the other side as someone who remained in the workforce, that the standards were impossible, and wanted to pair these two problems really. And I am going to stop sharing and just ask if anybody has any questions till now. Sheila, Sierra?
I have a question, Lynn.
Yeah.
You know, there've been a lot of reports recently about what they're calling the she session. You know, the number of women choosing to leave the workforce because of the extra stress at home during the pandemic. Are you seeing that through what you're doing, and is what you're doing help actually address that, I guess?
Yeah, it does. So what's happening is really the pandemic is exacerbating a problem that already existed, right? For women who stay in the workforce, the balance that we're trying to keep between work and family has always been like knife edge. We've always been teetering on unsustainable. Does that make sense? There isn't enough support for families. There isn't enough support inside the household and outside the household for dual earner families, essentially, or single earner families where the woman is the primary breadwinner. There just isn't enough support. And so we've always been balancing in an unsustainable way. And what the pandemic did is when it piled on additional responsibilities, domestic responsibilities that for cultural reasons fell more on women's shoulders than on men's. So they had more to do with caring for children and schools and making sure homework was done, and all of a sudden not having childcare options. All that burden kind of fell primarily on women's shoulders and just tipped the balance to completely unsustainable, from barely sustainable to completely unsustainable. And so, of course, women are opting out of the workforce if they financially can in any way. We've seen that at West 10th. We're a tiny, tiny tech startup that has just gotten started. And already we see that in applications, women are saying, I was furloughed And now I'm starting a home-based business to try to make up some of that income. And we've seen actually entire couples who said both of us were furloughed, and so we're starting a business together from home to try to make up some household income. And some are seeing it as an opportunity, quite frankly, that they didn't have before. They weren't happy in their jobs. They weren't happy with that balance. And now they've been forced into a different situation, and they're creating an opportunity out of that. Does that make sense? And really quickly, I'll just, Joe, if you don't mind, Sarah, Sheila, I'll just talk a little bit about the pivot to tech entrepreneurship and what that has been like to be a woman in tech. Is that okay? Do we have time for that, or are we kind of out of time?
No, you can keep talking. We're loving it.
So I told you about the journey in school. I had the opportunity to study the wealth gap, the reasons for that wealth gap, the pressure that we put on women to leave, the lack of support that we have for them coming back, you know, the good and the bad of that. Great for our societies, really negative for the individual who makes herself very economically vulnerable. That was the whole motivation for starting West 10th. I also had known about this problem of women in tech, where in the tech world, that's very dependent on venture capital, so investment, essentially. I don't know if you're aware, but only 2% of investment capital in the United States goes to women-owned businesses, 2%. So in 2019, that means that the company Juul, the e-cigarette company Juul, got $10 billion more in investment than every woman-owned company in the United States combined. One e-cigarette company got $10 billion more. So I was also aware of this problem. This is one of the pieces of access to financial capital that doesn't exist for women and doesn't allow them to generate wealth, right? If you have access to investment capital, you can create a sizable tech business. You can exit that business and have generated a lot of wealth for yourself. And by the way, if you're a woman who's done that, you are much more likely to reinvest that in your community, in other women, or in underrepresented communities that have need. So investing in women is actually a virtuous cycle, and yet it is not done in the United States. There's a dearth of investment in women. So I wanted to jump into that problem too. I don't know why I'm all about problems and jumping into them before I really know the extent of how hard it's going to be, but I wanted to jump into that too. So instead of just creating an educational platform that might help upskill women in their home-based business, I decided that I'd want to create a tech platform that would be at least attractive or in the realm of something that investment capital might be interested in because it can grow at scale. So Joe can attest to early days of us building West 10th, but I had no idea how to build a tech company, just absolutely no idea. But I figured, you know, if I can figure out parts of the tax code, I just feel like I can probably figure out tech entrepreneurship. And slowly but surely that has been true. It's been like jumping into a job at the associate level, quite frankly, not really knowing anything, having some idea, and then just learning on the job and learning as I go. But I was able to assemble kind of some engineers that are really competent, assemble a team that could help us design a tech product, get things off the ground. And we're still very early stage. We launched about 1.5 years ago outside of LA in Ventura County. And then we came to Salt Lake and Provo just a few months ago because this is my hometown. I know Salt Lake and Provo. I know there's a ton of home-based entrepreneurs and they're amazing. So we started gathering them onto an app. So we built an app, and it's basically a place where you can find all these home-based businesses and you can connect with them and buy their services or their goods. It's really early days. The product is a little raw, but it's there, it's beautiful, it works. And I will just shamelessly ask you all to get on the App Store or on Google Play Store and search for West 10th, all spelled out, WESTTENTH, and download the app and use it. You're supporting local women who are running businesses from home if you use it, and then you can all give us feedback on the good and the bad of it too. I would absolutely love it if you guys would take time to do that today. Anyway, we launched it, we got it running, we've gotten it up and started. We've got about 600 home-based businesses onboarded. And we started looking for investment capital because that was one of the reasons that we set out to start this company. And it was awful. It was so terrible. The stats around women are, for men, they have to take about 40 pitch meetings before they get a committed investment. For women, it's over 100. So it's over double. And that stat turned out to be true for us. We did about 120 pitch meetings before we were able to complete our first round. It's called a seed round. But we found investors out of Silicon Valley, out of Washington, D.C., and out of Los Angeles. And we just completed our first $1.5 million round that is meant to get us off the ground and get us started. So a huge learning curve, really hard. It's really hard to go into pitch meetings and act like you know what you're doing when you are a first-time founder. But with a lot of persistence and a lot of a learning curve that we were just willing to go through, and with the help and support of family like Joe, quite frankly, we were able to finally meet the investors that cared about the problem we were trying to solve and really love what we're building and invest in our company. And we are reinvesting that in the product and finding more home-based businesses and supporting them and actually giving them education and ways to generate more income. So that has been the tech journey so far. We're at the very beginning of it. So I'm asking for all your good vibes and support as we try to take this investment capital and grow it. In the investment sphere, a $1.5 million round is a pretty small round, to be honest with you. So we are pretty constrained in the capital that we have to try to create a tech business. But that's pretty true of all women-owned companies. They tend to have less resources available, carte blanche, but they also tend to outperform their male counterparts, which is one of the reasons it's really tragic that women don't get investment.
Lynn, can I ask a question before you move on? Because I'm really interested to know why you think that it's so much harder for women to get that investment, the venture capitalists to sign up, and why they have to do so many more pitches than men do. Do you have insight into that? What are your thoughts?
I do have insight into that. So traditionally, the reasons are that men generally held more wealth than women to begin with. And so they were more apt to risk it on high risk investments, which are startups, right? But also because they had the wealth to invest in risky investments like startups, the networks are mostly male. And the way that it works in venture capital is, in order to even get a pitch meeting, you need to have generally a warm introduction to a venture capital firm or someone at the firm. And women just don't have those networks. They tend to have networks that are filled with women and not with men. But those networks aren't as helpful because those women aren't as well resourced, essentially. So women are out there begging kind of for scraps in smaller networks that don't have as much capital. And they don't have the networks to get them even the introduction in the door. Systematically, it's something that needs to change in the venture capital world, quite frankly. It's a little bit like, you know what happened in the orchestral industry in the 80s? I don't know if you guys know the study of how they changed to blind auditions. So big orchestras like the New York Philharmonic, they started doing blind auditions to eliminate bias. And all of a sudden, when they didn't see the gender of the person auditioning, all of a sudden the gender ratios changed dramatically. They got to 50% women in their orchestras when they did blind auditions. The same thing needs to happen in venture capital, quite frankly. They need to create systems that don't introduce so much bias with warm introductions. They need to be able to evaluate companies without having someone network them in. But that's going to be a long time in coming. And then because venture capital is still mainly controlled by men, they're just apt to invest in things that they understand, right? And women are more apt to create businesses that serve women because our life experience is just different and they know it well. And so it's really hard for VCs who are mostly male to really get on board and be passionate about something that's being built primarily for women, unless it's already off and running and it's profitable and it's just a rocket ship that they want to get on, essentially. Does that answer your question, Sheila?
Yeah, it does, and it makes me think of Shark Tank, and there's only one woman on there in Sharks, and she does have a different perspective than the other sharks. Not that that's, I don't know if that's how realistic that is to real life, but just interesting. Yeah, thanks for your insights. Thanks for answering the question.
Yeah, I feel like my life over the last 8 months has been a continuously bad episode of Shark Tank with all the pitching that I've been doing.
Maria, I think on that same vein, right, what advice do you have for, you know, our folks that are accounting and tax professionals? You know, what have you learned from this exercise of pounding the pavement in trying to, you know, for lack of a better term, beg for scraps? And how would you, you know, advise us or translate that into our careers as CPAs?
Yeah, so especially for women, I would say networking is actually a big deal. And networking into male-dominated spaces, you just need to be doing that. So don't be afraid to try to expand your networks where men are, because generally men have more decision-making power and more wealth to begin with, and you need that in your career. So just don't put it off and don't be afraid of it. Just do it, essentially. Create those networks. And then for men, I'd say you really need to become advocates of women, not just mentors, not just like helpmeets, but advocates for the women that you are working with. Because also it's not that easy for women to just network into male spaces. They don't have, there's not a lot of like natural things to sometimes network into. If you're not into sports and you can't talk about sports, or, you know, you can't talk about your kids in the same way, it's just, there's some tension there that doesn't make it easy. So if men in positions of power, or greater power at least, can advocate for women and really help guide them into those networks, that goes a long way.
On these same lines, do you see, I'm looking for quick return on investment, I guess, in my question I'm asking, but do you see that a good way to go about would be try to break through the walls into the male dominated space from a investor standpoint? Or is would it be a better thing to try to build up these women supporting women networks to make them have more resources and make them more successful and bigger so that they're more noticed? Like, which one could be more lucrative faster?
I mean, both need to be done. There need to be networks of women supporting women, because just the experiences that they're having are different, right? And the statistics and the numbers are showing us that they're different. So they need to be a good space where women can support each other. But also you can't ignore who holds decision-making power, you know, especially in a state like Utah, where women are just politically completely underrepresented, and in business management, they're really underrepresented. In almost every sphere of decision-making, women are underrepresented, so you can't ignore that, because that'll be to your detriment, essentially. And I'll say play the long game. You know, what I didn't do well when I was in my accounting career, I'm an introvert, you know, I love the spreadsheet. I love hiding behind taxes, and I didn't really get out and expand my networks. And so when I was trying to start a business, I was really starting from scratch, and that was hard. So don't do that to yourself. Like, play the long game, create relationships. They don't have to be unnatural, but create relationships with the ultimate aim that you can help one another in business. That's not a bad thing. Not just that you're going to get something out of it, but that, you know, creating this relationship could help both of your businesses in the long run. Does that make sense? And both your careers in the long run. I love that question though, Megan. It's a good one. Does anybody else have any questions? Joe, Sheila, I feel like I have gone on and on and on.
No, I think we're loving it. I do have another question for you. I was thinking about, as you were talking about your path and things, that you've made some big decisions in your life that have helped you, going to Oxford and starting this company. What has fueled your ambition, or where does your confidence and your motivation comes from to make these big decisions and to carry them forward?
Yeah, I think early on, I came across that decision. Do I leave the workforce or do I stay in it? And this was in the early 2000s, 20 years ago. The pressure was pretty high on me to leave the workforce. But right when that decision had come, quite frankly, there's a personal event in our life. Joe and I lost our mother, and remaining in the workforce for me gave me a little bit of normalcy, a feeling of normalcy after I had my first child, which those events were really closely timed. So remaining in the workforce gave me a sense of normalcy. It also, quite frankly, gave me this feeling like I'm earning money, so I can use that to like fly back and see my family. And I can use that to send gifts to my younger brothers and sisters. And I just needed a little bit of financial independence to feel like I could do those things that were really important to me. And so I remained in the workforce. And it was a struggle, in all honesty, a feeling like, am I a good mom? Am I a good worker? I don't feel like I'm really either. But the reality is, like, staying in the workforce has almost nothing to do with whether or not you're a good mom. It's kind of a construct it's a story that we're telling, but it really doesn't. In fact, it can help you be a good mom. It all kind of depends on how you feel about motherhood, but it's not a detriment to motherhood. Neither is leaving the workforce a detriment to economic value. These are just stories that we've created about these two choices that don't really have to be real. But remaining in the workforce, I left PwC, I went to this new job, and my boss, who is a man, really fantastic man, he kept asking me, well, what do you think? What do you think about this problem? I'd present a problem and he'd say, what do you think? And I honestly, after a year of hearing that, I thought, I've developed a voice because this person keeps caring about what I think. And that didn't really happen in any other sphere of my life. So it was the development work helped me develop a voice for myself. And so work became indispensable to me because I knew it was helping me develop personally in ways that I wasn't able to outside of work. So anyway, that professional development gave me a little bit of a voice. And then kind of all the research that I was doing as a financial professional compelled me to make bolder choices that I might not have made earlier in my career because I didn't really have that voice, I would say. So actually being in the workforce is what helped me develop a voice and confidence. I'll say that confidence wavers from day to day, but it's propelling me forward.
I think it's interesting to add though, when our mother was sick, Lynn Marie, as the oldest daughter, felt that immense pressure to take care of her that I didn't feel, right? And she was the one that was flying back from New York and stayed with mom during her sick period and was taking care of our four younger siblings that were all still at home and in elementary and junior high and high school. And for me, right, I did not feel that same pressure. I was off, working busy season, and Lynn Marie was taking care of it. And I think kudos to her for doing all of that, which, I should have had more pressure to do so. But there's that balancing act that women have that I think that a lot of men don't have.
Yeah, but to your point, men have a lot of pressures also that keep them from, being connected or allowing them to connect and care, which is also not great. The pressure that you felt to be the sole provider didn't allow you, give you permission to come and spend time with mom at the same time. So we both were feeling pressures that could have been alleviated had we not had so many gendered expectations. So
So Joe, I'm interested in hearing like your reaction to all of the information that Lynn presents today. You know, I mean, is this obviously she's your sister and you brought her to us because you're excited about what she's doing, but you know, how does this kind of information change the way you approach women-owned businesses as clients, or does it help you want to get involved in like a tech thing and help with the pitches, or you know, does you having that information change anything? That's my question.
Yeah, I think so, Janice, right? And this information is all new to me. Lynn Marie hasn't shared the wealth gap with me. I've heard about the wage gap, and you guys have, you know, the women's group has probably addressed this in prior presentations, but that wealth gap is a new concept to me. And you know, given the economics of things, you know, this new information makes me excited about these female-run businesses that may be home businesses, but are going to be in hyper-growth mode because they're, and you know, I've used Lynn Marie's app and have bought cupcakes or, you know, helped with a party, and these are amazing. These are very, very talented folks that are going to be successful. And I think from my, you know, partner, you know, Squire partner point of view, right, this is the selfish side of me going, man, I need to be networking with these folks because these are going to be successful businesses that are going to need accounting and tax services. And boy, if I can get in at the outset, that's great. That's the selfish side of me. And I guess what my mind is thinking, Janice, from the Squire partner perspective too. But I think the other thing was kind of the advocacy role that males, you know, need to provide, right? I think that's another piece of information, and the distinction between a coach and a mentor and what an advocate is, someone that's really pounding the table for our female folks, you know, showcasing their work, showing what they've done, not just, hey, you know, this is what you should do, but really, you know, advocating, broadcasting that to the other leaders of the firm.
Thanks, Joe.
It makes me really proud to be a part of what we're trying to do at Squire to elevate women and help them gain voice. That we're doing some good things.
Yeah, I agree, Tim. I think that you don't know what you don't know. And I think that being involved with the women's group has opened my eyes and more what the issues are and how we as women can be a part of the solution. I think before we did the WIP group, I thought, well, this is a man problem, like men are not allowing us to be what we need to be, but that's not entirely true. I think we as women need to step up and be who we are and take our place and, you know, be empowered to take what is ours, to be a part of things. That's our role too.
And can I add, Sheila, too? I think as women in finance and accounting and finance, we have a role in helping other women in wealth generation, you know, in guiding them into investments and in guiding them into creating businesses and encouraging them to create businesses. You have the ability as accountants to help them do that, to help them navigate the world of LLCs and sole proprietorship and taxes, and to really encourage and support business growth, because that is one of the few avenues women really have at their disposal to generate wealth. And then you, as partners in an accounting firm, as professionals in an accounting firm, building up your own book of business, that's really your own business that you're building too. So look at the work that you do as wealth generating, and don't apologize for trying to build wealth for yourself either. Because like I said, the statistics show that when women generate wealth, they are more likely to return it to their families and their community. So it's actually important that women advocate for themselves in wealth generation as well. And that's all I'll say. I'm done.
Are there any other questions for Lynn?
I actually found this really interesting because
my family dynamics opposite of most people. My husband's the stay-at-home, and I work to like provide for the family. So it's interesting to see, like, look at it from like his point of view, I guess, because I've never been in that situation. I've never been home with my kids, like, besides working from home, right? But so it's interesting to see and think more about what he's given up to do that.
Yeah, and interestingly, the dynamics of that role shift, right? Because it's a non-traditional role, and what that means for your relationship and for society. But it's actually great that you guys are having these non-traditional roles and setting that up as a role model for your family and for other people that surround you.
We could probably squeeze one more question in if anyone else has another question or comment or.
I have a question. This is Lisa. Lynn, as you've been, going through your pitch experience, and you've encountered some men that I think some of us call, part of the man club. No offense, Joe and Tim, but when you come up against that as you're in a pitch and you can see that this is definitely a gender hurdle that you're having to work through, how do you approach that situation? What is your kind of go-to on, okay, this is happening, I can see that we're having this gender issue, maybe is there a different approach that you take when you see that happening in your pitches, or you just think maybe this is a right person to be working with?
Yeah, I mean, both situations happen. So research shows with women in pitching that they are more likely to be asked what are called loss aversion questions. So men, when they're pitching, are more likely to be asked about the size of the opportunity and how they're going to seize it. And women are more likely going to be asked about potential liabilities and how they're going to mitigate them. And for every, they're called loss prevention question, for every loss prevention question that a woman is asked, she basically, her ability to raise funding or the amount that she might raise from that pitch is reduced by $3 million. So if she's asked a lot of loss prevention questions, she's much, much, much less likely to get the money that she needs, essentially. But the good news is that women have tools at their disposal to turn those loss type of questions into opportunities. So if you're able to kind of navigate it and say, oh, I know you're asking about this, but it segues really nicely into the size of the opportunity and how I'm going to take that opportunity into hand and create a really big business, then you're actually able to get more money than even the men would get. So there's opportunity and even barriers, but I don't want to diminish the fact that the barriers are there, that you're going to get asked those loss prevention questions, that you're going to get into a situation that's clearly gendered and you're not going to make a lot of headway. And I think I've been in both situations where I've just said, this isn't going to go anywhere. So let's just like politely stop the conversation and agree not to meet again. And I've been in situations where you can see that there's gendered expectations coming into the situation, but that the person is open to a different viewpoint. And when you can feel that and intuit it, that's your opportunity to turn maybe a gendered situation into something that actually works for you. But it's tricky. It creates navigation. It requires a lot of navigation, and it requires a lot of feeling out the room. And I think you probably know what I'm talking about. All of you probably know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And you've seen both situations too in your own lives.
Yeah, definitely. That's nice. I mean, most of the times you can, in conversations like that they don't realize, that that's what's happening, that it is a gender thing, that it is a, for lack of better description, a man club thing. And they don't want to be that way. They just need that small, sweet nudge from a woman to say, hey, you're kind of being like this. But in a professional role, how do you say that to someone, without sounding like a girl? So that's good. Thank you. I appreciate you answering that.
Yeah, and I'd say like the expectation for us to be nice and to smile and to be polite and keep it a positive conversation is really high. But I think you can still have a really positive conversation without losing your authority. And so I think speaking with authority, even when you're maintaining some of the expectations, gendered expectations that someone might bring to a conversation. I think you can pair those expectations if you speak with authority and with confidence.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Lynn. I think that we're out of time. I bet we could probably sit and answer questions for another, or ask questions for another hour. We really appreciate you joining us today and your time. And thank you, Joe, for introducing us, and for Sierra for setting everything up. Hopefully everyone was able to get lunch on this crazy snowy day today. If not, I think we can use our gift cards for another day. Thank you, everyone, for being here, for your comments and questions, and for listening. And again, let me or Jenny know if you're interested in helping with our meetings for later in the year. And everyone have a wonderful winter day.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet all of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.